Hello and welcome back to LPRs Delivery. Today's topic is another vocabulary topic about something which sadly we often have to talk about for the IKO exams, and that's crashes. First of all, let's look at the word crash. Crash can usually be a verb, right? So crash, crashes, crashed, crashing, etc., which means to hit something hard enough to cause serious damage or destruction. Here's a common mistake. The plane was crashed into the sea. We should say the plane crashed into the sea because, like we see, crash is just a normal active verb like everything else. Another thing we notice is this. Crash. Tin. To. So we have crash, tin, to. This is a common collocation when we say the preposition into. So we notice that the ed sound makes crashed or crashed tin. And we link these sounds together. Crashed in, crashed into, crashed into. So here's some examples. The car crashed into the fence. She crashed into another car. A large meteorite may have crashed into the Earth 65 million years ago. Now, how about a little practice here if you were describing a photo? What would we say? Yes, an aircraft has crashed into the sea. Now, crash can also be a noun, and the plural is crashes, which shows that it is a countable noun. So, here's another common mistake. There was plane crash in Russia last week. Here's the mistake, because if we remember, crash is a countable noun. So what do we know about singular countable nouns? Means we need some type of determiner or article. So there was a plane crash in Russia last week. So remember that crash is countable, so when we use it in the singular, we'll need some type of determiner. Now, here's an example about Lion Air. We see starting in 2002 all the way to 2014, we have many crashes. So we can't say many crash because it's plural. So Lion Air has had many crashes in recent years. Don't forget to add this extra syllable. Crashes. Many crashes in recent years. On a side note, we can see here recently, and just about a month ago, that Lion Air was removed from the EU list of banned air carriers, which is good news for Lion Air. Next, we'll look at some more vocabulary that's often involved in crashes. These two words are wreckage and debris. So we'll look at these words and how to use them. First of all, wreckage. Wreckage. It is a non-countable noun, or an uncountable noun, and it includes the broken parts of a vehicle, building, etc., that have been badly damaged or destroyed. So, for example, workers sifted through the wreckage of the building searching for bodies, or they cleared the wreckage from the track. Now, debris, in American English, debris, or in British English, you'll sometimes hear debris. Now, I'm American, so for the rest of this lesson, I'll be saying debris. Debris is also an uncountable noun, which means the pieces that are left after something has been destroyed. So, the idea here is that generally debris is very similar to wreckage, but often it has the implication that debris is the smaller pieces. So, for example, let's look at this photo. All of this, the leftover parts of the plane and the small broken pieces, I would call all of this wreckage. We can see the wreckage from the crash. Or I can see the wreckage of a plane that has crashed. Now, for these smaller pieces, I would consider these debris. So the debris is more like the smaller pieces, and wreckage is all of it. There is some debris scattered around the area. Now, how about this picture? How could we describe this? The investigators are looking through the what? Actually, we could say both. The investigators are looking through the debris, or the investigators are looking through the wreckage. Again, these words are very similar, and we often use them interchangeably. Next, we'll look at the word damage. Damage is also an uncountable noun, so it can be the physical harm that's done to something or to somebody. Now, we just talked about wreckage, debris, and damage are all uncountable nouns, just like the word we talked about last lesson, which was traffic. So if you remember, we talked about all of these different quantifiers we can use with uncountable nouns. The same is true with our vocabulary today. So let's review and look at some examples. For positive sentences, we still have these. For example, little. The bird strike caused little damage to the fuselage, so the engineers said it was okay for the next flight. Let's look at the difference between this and a little. The bird strike caused a little damage to the fuselage, so the engineers repaired it before the next flight. See the difference? When we say little, then that means it's not enough damage to matter, or it's not a significant amount of damage, so there was no need to repair the aircraft. However, a little damage, it's still a relatively small amount, but it's enough that it matters. It's enough damage that the engineers had to repair it before the next flight. So you see, the meaning can be quite different. Next, some. Some debris has washed up on the shore in Egypt. A lot of. The impact of the crash scattered a lot of debris around the area. Next, we look at negative sentences that all have no or not or never. Authorities haven't found any of the wreckage. Thankfully, the storm didn't do much damage. Thankfully, the storm didn't do a lot of damage. Same idea. Next, we'll look at questions. Was some of the damage due to the weather? Can you see any debris floating in the water? Did you sustain much damage? So again, all of these quantifiers we can use with uncountable nouns, which we've been talking about for the last 2 lessons. Now let's talk about the word damage a little bit more. To get a good score on the vocabulary section, you'll need to have a good sense of collocation, which we talked about last lesson, which is a familiar grouping of words that usually go together. And the word damage has some typical collocations. First, let's think about this one. Let's look at verbs. Bird strikes can cause damage to aircraft. Or, bird strikes can do damage to aircraft. Notice that we can say cause damage or do damage. Both of these verbs collocate with the noun damage. However, we can also talk about it the other way. Aircraft sometimes sustain damage due to bird strikes. Here we see it's like the opposite. Bird strikes cause damage to the aircraft, so aircraft sustain damage, which means like get damaged. Now we can also look at some adjectives. In this picture, the aircraft overshot the runway, but only sustained some minor damage to the landing gear. So we see here minor damage, which means not serious. So we see the plane, probably very little damage was done to the aircraft. So we can say minor damage. We could also say slight damage. Same idea. Now, this situation is obviously more serious. So we might say the crash landing probably caused severe damage to the fuselage. Here we see the collocation severe damage. We might also say serious damage or extensive damage. These three collocations are very common to talk about heavy damage. So severe damage, serious damage, and extensive damage. Now the next step up would be the type of damage that totally destroys the aircraft. And we often call this irreparable damage. The crash did irreparable damage to the aircraft. The idea here is that it's the type of damage that cannot be repaired. Irreparable. So that's it for today's vocabulary lesson. I hope you find it helpful. I will say one thing, that as the ancient Chinese philosopher said, that if you tell me, I'll forget. Teach me, and I may remember, but involve me and I learn. So please remember that watching videos can be helpful, but it's not going to be enough to really help you to learn language that's in a lasting way. And our time is short. So please remember to take the quizzes and also to practice on your own as much as you can. You can practice this question. Describe an incident in which an aircraft was damaged. You can type your response and email it to me, or you can speak and you can record on your phone or your iPad and then send it to me. I'll be more than happy to give you some feedback. So thank you for your time, and I wish you all the best. ขอบคุณครับ สวัสดีครับ